If you are watching this presentation, then you are probably interested in one of the equine sector's biggest issues currently, maintaining public acceptance of the many ways in which horses currently provide enjoyment to millions of people all over the world. Let's start with why this is even an issue. After all, people have been riding horses for thousands of years. Why is this even being questioned? It is being questioned because there are many in society, both outside of and interestingly inside the horse world, who feel that there are areas where equine welfare standards need to improve. Society's ideas of what is acceptable in terms of how we use and keep animals have evolved over the years, and now it is the turn of the horses to be under the spotlight. The people who think that horses deserve a better deal have a voice, and they need to be listened to, not least because they have influence. That influence may not be obvious, but the experience of other industries that have faced challenges to their public acceptance, or social licence as it is sometimes called, shows that public opinion is indeed very powerful. And once public opinion has turned against an industry, external regulation and an eventual ban may not be too far away. This has already happened to some sports within equestrianism, and we need to regard it as a wake-up call to change our practice where needed, but also as an opportunity to demonstrate why the horse-human relationship can both be ethical and mutually beneficial. So, what do we need to do? In this 20-minute presentation, I will run through a series of strategies that have been effective in helping other industries to maintain their social licence. These include maintaining society's trust, being legitimate, transparent and credible, demonstrating that we can be trusted with safeguarding our horses' welfare, taking the public's values into account in our decision making, and always giving the horse the benefit of any doubt that exists. It can also be helpful to listen to outsiders, measure, record and publicise the welfare impacts of changes in practice or policy, support those within the horse world who are ready to change, and involve stakeholders in planning how equestrianism should move forward in a world where the goalposts seem to shift with every month that goes by. And finally, we need to consider the power of communications to influence the public acceptability of our sports, always remembering that words ring hollow if they do not reflect the truth. So let's delve into all of this in a bit more detail and start by finding out what the public really thinks. In May 2022 and again in 2023, World Horse Welfare commissioned YouGov, an independent market research firm, to investigate public opinion about horse sport. Those surveys, which were carried out in the United Kingdom, showed that 20% of the public do not support the continued involvement of horses in sport in any circumstances, and a further 40% only support this if welfare improves. So that's 60% who don't like the status quo. And it's not only the general public who think like this. People who interact regularly with horses have similar views. These results are supported by those from other countries. In July 2022, the FEI, which is the world governing body for a range of horse sports, including show jumping, dressage and eventing, commissioned an independent company to conduct a global survey of public perception of sport horse welfare. The graph shows the response to the question, which of the following statements regarding the welfare of horses in sport do you most agree with? More than half of the 14,000 respondents, who came from 14 different countries, said, "I believe welfare standards need improving." And among equestrian stakeholders, so that's the people from the horse sector, 78% of the nearly 28,000 respondents to a survey promoted by the FEI, who came from 116 countries, expressed the same sentiment. So whilst we shouldn't read too much into any individual survey, I believe that this is a pretty good indication that there is an issue here, and it's not just the general public that is concerned. The equestrian public is as well. And here are just two examples of what can result from ignoring these sentiments. Jump racing has all but disappeared from Australia, and riding will no longer form part of modern pentathlon at the Olympics after Paris 2024. concerns about horse welfare underpin the loss of both these sports. So what kind of welfare issues are we talking about? I think we can all see welfare compromise in these images. The public sees this too. And in this brave new world of the internet and social media, images and videos can be disseminated widely and rapidly, fueling growing public concern. So if we ever did have control of the message, we certainly don't now. And people trust what they see, not what we say. If we are to starve our critics of oxygen, we must take a zero-tolerance approach to welfare issues that undoubtedly exist. In addition, some images may look fine to people who have grown up with horses, but may not look so fine to the general public. And we need to recognise this too. There are some who talking about public acceptance of equestrianism risks scoring an own goal. I really would challenge this. Whether we like it or not, the world is talking about horse welfare, and we need to be part of that conversation, a conversation that needs to reach every corner of equestrianism. And we can't achieve that if we only talk about it behind closed doors. Industries that hide their heads in the sand over social licence issues tend to go under. We don't want to be one of them. This is exactly what happened at SeaWorld. 2013 saw the release of a documentary called Blackfish, which covered the consequences of keeping orcas in captivity. Blackfish focused on the capture and subsequent life of Tilikum, an orca who was involved in the deaths of 3 people, and contended that the stress of captivity, training and performance underpin this type of aggressive behaviour. The effect of the documentary on SeaWorld was reported in a recent scientific paper, which used stock market data and interviews to illustrate how popular media can really play an important role in shaping public attitudes. Blackfish caused negative publicity for SeaWorld and changed how people view marine mammal captivity. SeaWorld lost credibility by dismissing the documentary as lies, and their response was regarded as slow and inadequate. Park attendance decreased, SeaWorld were forced to stop their orca breeding programme, and the company's market value dropped. This shows that poorly handled public sentiment really can damage an industry. Poor handling notwithstanding, we need to appreciate that society changes over time. Several animal use activities have been banned in many countries over the years, whilst others now elicit widespread criticism. Most, if not all of us, will have a visceral reaction to many of these images, to our 21st century sense of morality or ethics. It seems wrong to subject animals to these painful, degrading or low welfare experiences. This shows that over the years, what's deemed to be acceptable treatment of animals has changed, and we need to recognise that society's morality dial continues to shift. People are starting to view the use of horses for human entertainment or financial gain through an ethical lens, just as previous generations re-evaluated the rights and wrongs of sports like bear baiting. Now try standing in the non-horsey public's shoes. Here in 2023, and look at these images, recognising that these horses are being used for human entertainment and or commercial gain. If you, like many people, make your living out of equestrianism or use horses for leisure, this should give you pause for thought. The equine sector in Britain is rightly proud of its contribution to society and the economy, and I am sure that is true in many other countries. But in return, we must recognise that the public sees many of us as being part of a wider horse industry, making money from horses, and they will judge us particularly harshly if we put commercial interests before horse welfare. This image shows the fundamentals of maintenance of social licence, as shown by the experience of other industries. As you can see, maintenance of trust is central to this whole concept. And we need to recognise that this is relevant for a growing proportion of people within equestrianism as well as the public. There are other important concepts to take on board. we need to have legitimacy in the eyes of the public. We need to be transparent and credible, and we need to demonstrate that we are competent to be trusted with safeguarding our horses' welfare. We need to take the time to find out what the public values are, to share their values where appropriate, and if we think about these are inappropriate, to explain why, using scientific evidence where it is available. And where evidence is lacking, we must invoke the precautionary principle, always erring on the side of caution when the welfare of the horse might be put at risk. The text in blue around the central image shows some of the many strategies that have been used successfully by other industries that have faced a challenge to their social licence. Some of these involve bringing outsiders, those with particular expertise or with a different viewpoint, into our organisations. Other involve supporting those who are ready to change, acknowledging that change takes time and that a knowledge of human behaviour change science can make all the difference in the adoption of new practices. Then there are strategies that involve recording the welfare impacts of changes in practice or policy, demonstrating change over time, and being transparent about the results, doing research into stakeholder and public perception, and involving stakeholders in the sports plans for the progression. Finally, we need to consider the power of communications, both within equestrianism and with the wider world, and how this may influence the public acceptability of the sport. We will cover some of these recommendations in the following slides. So here is our first strategy: using science to unpick the drivers of trust and acceptance. We can do this by using engagement science, and as in this example from a different animal use industry. The drivers of trust are shown on the left, with the additional drivers of acceptance also shown. The thickness of the arrows indicates the relative strength of the association. Note that trust is the most important driver of acceptance in this industry, and that the top two drivers of trust are responsiveness to public concerns and animal welfare issues. This approach tells you, for your industry, where to concentrate your efforts on public acceptance. Now let's move on to the second strategy: embracing the values of the public, as well as those within the equestrianism who are calling for change, is extremely important. This doesn't mean that we must bow to every public whim, but it does mean that we need to listen with humility, scrutinise our practice, and either change or defend the status quo on the basis of evidence. In essence, we must adopt an ethically informed and evidence-based approach to deciding on rules and best practice. And if there is no evidence, we should adopt the precautionary principle in favour of the horse. This is a sustainability model for the animal agricultural industry, developed by a social licence or public acceptance expert. Note the requirement for grounding in ethics and scientific validation, but we are just getting going to focus on how ethics for now. This shows where the goalposts are likely to be within equestrianism. If engagement science research supports this, it will require a mindset shift for many. And it isn't giving in to the antis, it's taking control, doing the right thing by our horses in an intelligent way, and investing in the future of our sport. To help with this, an ethical framework for the use of horses in sport is currently under development. The idea behind the framework, it will provide everyone across equestrian sports with a decision-making tool that they can use to work their way through an ethical issue they may need to consider. So for example, if you want to decide whether or not you should take your horse to an equestrian event in particularly hot weather, you could use the tool to look at all the relevant evidence and feed that into a harm-benefit analysis. And this would help you to decide to do what is right. Key considerations in coming to a decision are that you should minimise negative welfare effects and maximise positive effects. Identify and mitigate against avoidable, unnecessary risks, and comply with the law and all governing body regulations. Moving on, the third strategy is showing that we are worthy of the public trust by demonstrating responsibility towards horses. This responsibility is collective. In other words, it relates to individuals as well as regulatory organisations. But what does responsible behaviour look like? It looks like asking, should I, before asking, can I? It looks like putting the horse first in all situations, and it looks like keeping up with new knowledge in the horse world and applying it in the context of competition, rules and regulations, as well as in the management of everyday individual horse care. It looks like embracing regulation and going above and beyond mandated minimum standards. Asking for derogation or exception from these standards is exactly the wrong message to send, because, as other industries have found out to their cost, if we do not effectively self-regulate, we will have external regulation imposed on us. And once external regulation has been put in place, it is rarely revoked. This is how this typically unfolds for industries that lose their social licence. There are other things that we should do to demonstrate our responsibility. We need to fund high quality research, put findings into practice industry-wide quickly, and adopt the precautionary principle when we don't have the evidence. So we need to ask, is the horse world, who should be guardians of equestrianism, taking these responsibilities seriously enough? Are things moving far enough, fast enough? Progress in many areas, such as constant stabling and forceful use of the whip in multiple branches of equestrianism, might seem mighty slow to the outside world. We all know that good communications are vitally important for every industry, but we must avoid the hollowness of empty words. We need to walk our talk, improve welfare, measure outcomes, as in these FEI data on rotational falls, because ultimately we will be judged on our actions, not our words. We also need to be open-minded and keep learning. The welfare goalposts are constantly moving. Most of us know about the 3 Fs, forage, freedom and friends, and it's been suggested that we should add a 4th F, fun, which brings in the concept of positive welfare. Positive welfare focusing on allowing animals to experience good things rather than just trying to avoid bad things is championed in the 5 domains, which also focuses on animals' welfare state and are now recognised as the basis for good welfare. Good welfare is, after all, both physical and mental, and we need to consider whether we should be judging our animals' emotional states using tools such as qualitative behavioural assessment. Finally, we need to be open-minded about the advances in equine health and behavioural science that are being published all the time, and use this evidence in our rules and decision making. But how do we know what is really scientifically valid? We must learn how to evaluate new ideas and scientific findings. The slide shows the hierarchy of scientific evidence, which is an important concept for all of us who need to know which scientific results we can trust, or know who to ask or where to find trustworthy information. Then we need to embrace scientifically or practically valid findings and practices. And now to our final strategy. We all need to pull together on this. The public doesn't differentiate among different branches of equestrianism. Finger pointing damages us all, and in a final analysis, we must all play for Team Equestrian. So all communications should be constructive. So where does this leave us? In short, we have a great collective opportunity to ensure the continued public acceptance of equestrianism. For sure, maintaining that acceptance requires a change of mindset for some individuals and organisations, and public acceptance is a dynamic concept that won't stand still. But recognising this challenge, this opportunity, is an important first step. Much of the equestrian world has already started on this journey and is enacting change. But we must broaden this out to encompass all of equestrianism, and we must pick up the pace. The decisions we make today and tomorrow will shape horse sport for years to come. So for the good of the sport, let's be brave.